One of the very first things we start scaring you to death about in your CCENT and CCNA studies is a broadcast storm. And just to clarify, this is not something that happens at one time. The word storm makes it sound like a lightning strike. Your switch is just fine, and then all of a sudden it's totally overwhelmed with broadcasts. That is almost never the case. Because what happens is the number of broadcasts and multicasts and unknown unicasts, they begin to slowly overwhelm your switch. And it hits your performance a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until it overwhelms your switch and is so busy handling all this crap that it can't do what we really need it to do. Now, whether this is accidentally or maliciously caused, what we tend to forget with the broadcast storm is that not only can they overwhelm the switch, they'll overwhelm the host connected to the switch. Because what's the switch doing with all these broadcasts, with all these multicasts, with all those unknown unicasts? They're flooding that stuff out, man. And it can not only overwhelm your switch, but it makes your host non-operational. So I know the word proactively is really overused, but we do need to be proactive in this case, and Storm Control helps us do that. It is specifically designed to proactively stop that flooding before our hosts are hit with so much flooded traffic that they can't handle it. And it's enabled on a per port basis. I'm going to go ahead and bring the live equipment up here. Squeeze that right back down. And let's work on interface fast 0/1 in this one. The command is storm control with a hyphen. So if you just type storm control, you start getting unrecognized command. Now you know why. We've got a couple of options. It's really simple. This is a powerful feature. It's very simple to configure. Just one small numeric gotcha that we're going to take a look at here in this lab. We have first the action to take during storm control or for storm control. We'll talk about that after we look at broadcast, multicast, and unicast. I know I don't have to tell you this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I wish iOS help said this. When they mention unicast, they mean unknown unicasts, because we know those are frames that the switch doesn't know what to do with. It's an unknown unicast. It's an entry not in its MAC table. So what happens? It gets flooded out. It's definitely not talking about known regular unicast traffic. So let's start with broadcast. The options are the same for all three in the choices that you're going to see here. And we set broadcast and then level. And your iOS can differ a little bit here. We definitely are going to see rising threshold, and we're going to see suppression level in packets per second. I haven't seen bits per second on every switch that I've worked with, so you may run into that. Personally, I have always used percentages. If you find packets per second easier to work with, please do. But what I'm going to do is use the percentage from 0 to 100, and I can actually tie that down to 2 decimal points, and enter rising threshold. What exactly does that mean? That's the percentage at which action will be taken, and with this percentage we're talking about total bandwidth. So if I put, for example, 50 right there, it means that I want action taken when my available bandwidth is over 50% being taken up by broadcasts. Broadcasts are using over 50% of my available bandwidth. So let's go ahead and look at the next value. The next one is falling threshold. Enter falling threshold. But also notice we have a CR there. So storm control broadcast level 50 is a legal command on its own. So if I take for, I shouldn't say take for granted, but we know the falling threshold then makes perfect sense that that is the threshold at which action will no longer be taken. So what is that falling threshold if I only set one threshold? Well, it will also be the rising threshold. Your rising and falling thresholds are the same value. So what storm control broadcast level 50 means is that when over 50% of my available bandwidth is taken up by broadcast, action will be taken, and when that level of broadcast falls below 50% of available bandwidth, then the action is no longer taken. But if I put two values in, like say 50-40, that means that the action's taken when over 50% of available bandwidth is sucked up by my broadcast, and action will no longer be taken when that same level drops below 40%. Very important difference there. Again, there's no right or wrong way to use it. I mean, it's not wrong to put one value. I've usually just used one myself in production networks, but if you want to use two, knock yourself out. The key is to know both of these options for your exam and know what's going on there. Now, let's go ahead and just enter that. And I do want to show you that with multicast, it would be the exact same thing. Exact same thresholds. You don't have to set the same thresholds, but exact same options, I should say. 50, 40. We'll go ahead and put that in. And our unknown unicast. Exact same options. So we're all good there. Now, let's take a look at show storm control. And this is going to show you the action. Let's use that broadcast. You can also take a look at these on an individual basis. And since we set it to 50, 40 for all of them, it's going to show that under forwarding, under the show storm control, I should say. But I did want to show you that you could look at those individually as well as an interface on a per interface basis. But since I only put it on one interface, that's all we're seeing. And it's pretty easy to read. So show storm control is the way we verify what we've done. So we've taken care of everything except what? What the action is. So let's go back to FASTA 1 and talk about these two actions. And you might say, well, there's not much talking to be done because, by golly, that's pretty self-explanatory. What I do want to mention to you, beyond the options of shutdown and trap here, there's a default action. And it's exactly what you would think it would be, and that is dropping the offending frames. Once you go over your suppression level, those frames start getting dropped. So if you enter shutdown or trap, what you're doing is adding this action to that default. You're not replacing it. So again, the default for storm control is to just dump the offending frames that are over the level, over your suppression levels, and shut down the interface if a storm occurs. That's pretty harsh, but you could do that. And you might also want a simple network management protocol trap, an SNMP trap sent. And if you're not familiar with what a trap is in SNMP, we do have a video in the course that's going to help you out with that. That is really it for storm control. You just need to know how to set the thresholds, what it means when you have one, what it means when you have two, how to verify it, what the default action is, and what those other two actions are. I do want to show you a little bonus here because it hit me while we were doing the last video. We've certainly created ether channels, and I have an ether channel running here, by the way, I did during the break when I was clearing the previous video's configs off. And I wanted to show you how to configure something on there. It's intuitive, but I still want to show you this. And storm control is a good enough place to do it as any. I didn't mean that one. Let's try show interface trunk. And there's our port channel 1. We know all about that. Let's run show config. And we've got our port channel 1 up here. And you can also see that the broadcast, unicast, and multicast levels that we set, of course, are in your config. But let's say that we wanted to apply storm control to an ether channel. Can we do that? Let's find out. Let's do an exit there. Get rid of my mouse. You just configure it like you would any physical or logical channel. Just interface port channel 1. And let's say, let's just use my up arrow here. Let's just say that we wanted to set that to 30 and 20 for our threshold. And we're going to set it for broadcast as well. And we'll go with 35, 25 there. And that's all there is to it. Now what I did want to show you, and this is true of quite a few things as far as your ether channels go, is that you will see the config right there under interface port channel 1. You expect to see that. What you might not expect to see is when you go down into the interfaces that are part of that port channel, and right here that happens to be 11 and 12, that it's going to show you the same commands there. It's real easy to go through the config and say, wait a minute, I don't remember putting that there. Well, what happens is those ports in your ether channel are really inheriting the setting that you put on the port channel itself. So that's not just true of storm control, it's true of some other features, but I did think it was time you saw that. I wanted to make sure to show that to you. That wraps up our talk and lab with storm control. We're going to look at another switch security feature in the very next video. I'll see you there.